Hello, Saranya.
Following Sam Petroda's remarks on 24th April, both Congress and BJP has been accusing each other of reviving inheritance tax. Can you please explain what inheritance tax is and the whole reason for this debate on it?
Saranya, this is merely a proxy battle. Inheritance tax or wealth tax, these are taken as symbols on both sides. On one side, you have an argument for redistribution of wealth as the means to prosperity, as the means to eliminating poverty, as the means to promoting equality. On the other side, you have the argument that the government's job is to build infrastructure, invest for the future, encourage private investment and entrepreneurship, grow the economy, create jobs, promote skills, and therefore enhance incomes. So it's basically growth versus redistribution. Now in that, because this very complex debate is difficult for people to understand, parties are using certain taxes as a proxy and certain subsidies and redistribution as proxy. Now, the big picture is there are countries which actually focused on distribution. Perhaps the most notorious country today still focusing entirely on distribution or redistribution is North Korea. Now, you don't have to go far. Ever since Marx came up with his literature, and ever since Soviet Union was formed, in 1917 the Russian Revolution took place and Lenin and his friends took over. This debate has been going on. 1950s and 60s during Stalin time, there was a perception of remarkable progress, 1940s and 50s. From a distance, it appeared no big infrastructure was developing, big industry was developing, then the military industry was developing. So many people were enamored by the Soviet model. Even Indian leaders, we were enamored by that. That's the reason why we went for the planning commission, planned economy, a license permit quota raj, private sector's role being limited, public sector occupying the commanding heights of the economy. All these are because of the influence of the Soviet model. Not only India, many countries, they were influenced by the Soviet model at the time. But by the 1970s, and particularly by 80s, it was very clear that one model has lost, another model has won. Every country that embraced the distribution model, state control model, anti-growth model, planned model, every country that embraced that model has collapsed. So what happened? Soviet Union became 15 republics. Once a mighty power next only to United States, almost equal to United States, is today actually nothing economically. Because they still have a lot of missiles, a lot of atom bombs and thermonuclear weapons, they have a lot of nuisance value. Otherwise, they're insignificant as a power in the global power stakes. Other countries, I told you North Korea and South Korea, it's a great laboratory. Same language, same culture, same religion, same history, same tradition. But one part embraced the idea of economic growth, the other part embraced the idea of distribution. I don't think there's any person on earth who wants to go to North Korea and settle down. Whereas there are millions who would like to go to South Korea and settle down. Or take East Germany versus West Germany. East Germany was part of the Soviet bloc, what they called Iron Curtain in those days. Churchill called it Iron Curtain between the East and the West. So there was actually a physical wall built in Germany, in Berlin Wall. Thousands fled East Germany to go into West Berlin. Many of them, they died because the armed guards, they shot them down, they killed them. Not one person tried to flee from West Germany to East Germany. Not one person died in that quest. Finally, Berlin Wall collapsed in 1989. In 1991, East and West Germany were integrated. There is almost nobody in the erstwhile East Germany who would say, I would like to go back to that era. Take Venezuela, a very rich country in terms of natural resources. They also followed the redistribution model and giving things free rather than enhancing the capacity and incomes. Venezuela is now a basket case. It's a desperate country. Our own country until 1991. There was a time when our tax rate, income tax rate, there are many taxes, you talked about inheritance tax, but income tax is the most important one. Our income tax rate in 1971 was 97.75%. The tax rate above 2 lakh rupees income was 85%. That means on 1 lakh rupees additional income, 85,000 rupees you have to pay tax. It did not stop at that. On 85,000 rupees tax, they imposed a surcharge of 15%. Now 15% of 85,000 comes to 12,750. That means on 1 lakh rupees additional income, there was a tax of 97,750. What was the idea? So that nobody can accumulate wealth. You talked about inheritance tax. What is inheritance tax? Nobody should have a lot of wealth. You should not have enough money to transfer to the next generation. If you do transfer, a lot of it will be taken away by the government. What was the idea of 97.75% tax? That you cannot accumulate at all. So the idea is good on paper. What happened? India became a pauper. It became a disaster. So with very high rates of taxation, or with this inheritance tax, wealth tax, etc., it appears very nice because, which human being does not want equality? Which human being does not suffer from envy and jealousy? If you have something I don't have, it is but natural I feel envious. I must take away from Saranya. It's a normal human impulse. But it's a classic case of cutting the nose to spite the face. We hurt our own economy. What happens is that taxes like this are imposed. If I earn money I cannot transfer to next generation or I cannot enjoy it. What's the point of earning? What's the point of working hard? What's the point of innovating? So I will go to the low level of equilibrium. Ultimately, what will happen? The overall economic growth stops. New wealth creation stops. New ideas, new investments stop. So you perpetuate poverty. That's why North Korea is abjectly poor. That's why Venezuela became poor. That's why many countries that embraced the old socialist model, they became very poor. The second is, if inheritance tax is imposed, it does not mean that you are going to get a lot of revenue. There are countries which have inheritance tax even today. Many countries in the OECD, the rich countries, Organization of Economic Cooperation and Development, the European, North American, South Korea and other countries, they are rich countries, developed countries. There are some 47 or so such countries. About 14, 15 of them do have inheritance tax. But how much are they able to collect? 0.2% of GDP, 0.4% GDP, 0.5% GDP. In those countries there is no black money, as we know in India. Despite that, somehow or other the parents figure out a way of avoiding the inheritance tax. Instead of transferring it by will after death, they transfer it by a variety of mechanisms without taxation early on in life. That is human nature. Third thing is, if even then they are uncomfortable, what will they do? They move to other countries. Instead of being in this country, after all, in this globalized world, when you can live anywhere, and culturally and otherwise you are comfortable anywhere in the world, you go to areas where you can do business without too many hurdles. You can go to areas where the taxation is low. You can go to areas where corruption is lower. You can go to areas where the quality of life is better. So they move. Particularly in a country like India where corruption is perceived to be high, quality of services is poor, governance is generally not as good as it should be, there is not much of rule of law, then you are only driving away the people who are creating wealth. There are about a few thousand enterprises that matter in India, maybe 10,000, maybe 15,000 enterprises. Most of our economic activity is based on what happens in these companies. Now, if we lose these 10 or 15,000 people, already we are talking about high net worth individuals leaving the country. If you notice, the last few years, we've been told this year so many thousand people have gone to America, so many other people have gone to some other country. Why? When you are in that bracket, the whole world is welcoming for you. You don't have to be in only one country. Now, if you lose them, who will lose? If you lose their investment, their innovation, their job creation, they move to areas where the taxation is lower, harassment is lower, corruption is lower. Who are going to lose? We are going to lose. So it's a classic case of cutting the nose to spite the face. An illusion that something good is happening, but in reality it's a disaster economically for the country because we are still at $2,700 per capita income. The most important determinant to end poverty is still per capita income or median income of a nation. Median means exactly the middle person, how much the person is getting. And the way to give everybody an opportunity, certainly inequality also grows with economic growth, that's a fact in the market economy. So the way to overcome that is quality education. Every child is endowed by God or nature with intelligence. In that sense, God is socialist. Now, if the child's intelligence is allowed to flower, if the child acquires skills to be able to navigate in the modern society and modern economy, innovate and create wealth, then no matter where you are born, a rich family or a poor family, you can compete with any kid anywhere in the country or the world. That is the way to promote equality, not forcibly taking away something from one parent and giving it to the rest of the people. It looks nice. It doesn't work. So education, then create many islands of excellence, instead of one or two islands of excellence in big cities, create many small towns as engines of economic growth so that people from rural areas, India's poverty is substantially rural and urban both. But unless the rural unorganized people, 70% people still live in villages, 65% people, unless they can move with low skills to small towns in the neighboring area, you cannot give them opportunity. So decentralize economic growth engines, create many more growth engines, transform agriculture, modernize agriculture, compress the supply chains, and make sure that the farmer gets a significant part of the end product at the price, and the consumer gets a fairly stable price and good quality. Go for value addition. So instead of going into these directions, if we pretend that by taking away from Sharanya and giving it to JP, you are promoting India's economic growth or reducing poverty, we are simply fooling ourselves because we tried all this. I told you in 70s and 80s what happened. We failed spectacularly. Even now we are a very high taxed country. Our personal income tax for the higher incomes is more than 40%, 42, 43%. Our corporate tax is 25%. And our highest GST is 28%. Our customs duties are 200, 300% for some of the luxury goods. So, high taxation appears very nice. There's something called Laffer curve. It says that if you tax too high, then actually income comes down, not up. People know how to evade taxes. So, moderate taxes, well administered, without corruption and harassment, and well collected, and utilizing the money to a good cause in a proper way, efficiently. That is the trick, not simply tax them to death and then somehow hope that things will improve.
So you explained that high taxes will, reduce the income of the country.
Reduce income, depress the growth, depress the creative energy, the growth impulse, the animal spirits as they call it, and all around guarantees perpetuation of poverty.
So where do you think India is in current times? Is it having high taxation, or is it going towards high taxation, or is it maintaining a moderate taxation?
Until 1991, we believed in very high taxation. I told you in 1970s we had 97.75% personal income tax. And excise duties were very high too, all kinds of things. Now we became a little better. But still, in the last 15-20 years, many countries have reduced taxes. Take very rich countries, very powerful magnates, United States, Britain, etc., they brought down both the personal income tax and the corporate income tax significantly. So, if we actually do a good job of growing the economy and raising revenues with moderate taxes, there's actually a case for reducing the taxes further. For instance, many people, including the opposition parties in India, are strongly arguing that GST of 28% is too high. You could argue, I'm sure there are other arguments, that why should I price the luxury goods less. I'm also in sympathy with that argument. But the point is, broadly speaking, our tax rates are still a little on the higher side compared to rest of the world with which we are competing. Take China. China doesn't have high tax rates. And China is 5 times richer than us. If you take China's GDP, our population is roughly the same. China's GDP is about 18-19 trillion dollars now, maybe close to 20 now, latest number. We are at about 3.8 or something. So despite being 5 times richer than us, their tax GDP ratio is comparable to us, about 20-21%. Some people unwisely are talking about British tax GDP ratio or Norway's tax GDP ratio, which is 40-50%. The higher the prosperity, the greater the prosperity, the higher the per capita income, the greater can be the tax GDP ratio. When you are at a poverty level, a poor country cannot have tax GDP ratio because most of the money earned by most of the people goes towards consumption of day-to-day needs. So where is the money to tax? So until you become prosperous, you can't tax more. You can't even collect more taxes. Even if the tax rates are the same, you can't collect taxes because how many people are paying income tax in India? It's only even now about 9-10 crores out of 140 crore population. So to say that our tax GDP ratio will go up, should go up immediately, is a very bad idea. It's an impractical idea. Our first priority is use money wisely for investment, infrastructure, encourage investment and encourage innovation, promote skills, create jobs and have many growth magnets. And by losing focus on the important thing, by wasting our energy on the old failed ideas, these are old ideas and failed ideas, all over the world and in India, we are simply doing a great disservice to the next generation.
Yes, sir. So, as you mentioned, we had inheritance tax before in India, which was called estate duty, which was abolished later. Now, do you think in current times, reintroducing it or in the near future, reintroducing something similar to inheritance tax is a good idea?
It's a bad idea because already we are losing high net worth individuals from India. And in a globalized economy, with today there are no technological barriers. Children in India grow up thinking of the whole world as theirs. If something comes up on Netflix, it's streamed immediately in India. If some fashion designs come in Paris or London, I don't know much about these things, but I'm sure Indian kids also follow them. Or apps, other things. So in a globalized world, by either adding new taxes which make it unattractive for you to create wealth, the incentive is all wrong, or by higher taxes where a lot of the money you earn is taken away by the state, particularly when the services are poor, quality of life is inadequate, corruption is ubiquitous, governance is generally not in a good shape, or rule of law is in shambles, then there will be a temptation for all talented and high net worth individuals to flee the country. They go to tax havens, countries where taxation is lower, quality of life is higher, opportunities are greater. So ultimately, it will destroy our economy. We need to grow at 8 or 9% for the next 20-30 years. China grew at 8-9% for 30 years. They didn't have a tax regime. And China is a Maoist socialist country, communist country, remember. A country where private property was banned until 1970s. And if a communist country that tried out all the experiments has changed track, had a low tax, stable regime, promoting investment and infrastructure, and became a spectacular example of economic growth, equality of opportunity, it is absurd for us to go back to the pre-1970s Chinese way or pre-1990s Indian way. These are already tried and tested. They proved to be very dangerous ideas. We should not go back to that at all.
Yes, sir. But so even educated people like you and me still think that accumulation of money and resources with only a very minority of population in the country can be dangerous and unfair to the rest of the country.
Surrender is normal human impulse. If you have something I don't have, I want to take away from you. I want to see you fall. But the point is, we must be practical. क्या फायदा है? What am I getting out of it? Instead of me trying to bring you down, if I look at myself and see how I lift myself up, I'll be better off. If by trying to bring you down, I cannot hold you in the country, you run away from the country. Wealth creation stops. Poverty is perpetuated. In what way are we helped? See, modern economic growth based on competition, economic freedom, and choice. These are the cardinal principles of modern economic growth. Free trade, right to property. You pay the taxes due to the state, pay unto Caesar what is due to Caesar, and retain the rest, it's yours. Enjoy the freedoms. That is the broad model that much of the world is embracing. Now, this model, what is the upside? There is tremendous innovation, investment, economic growth, job creation, wealth creation. Therefore, money spreads, poverty comes down, the quality of life of everybody goes up. What is the downside? The innovator who succeeds in competition amasses much more than the rest. And in this technological era, that possibility is even greater. See, the companies that are the biggest in the world today, they were either non-existent or their names were unknown 20, 25 years ago. Microsoft, your Google, or your Facebook, many others. 25 years ago, they practically non-existent. And the companies that were very famous at that time, they are just ordinary companies now. IBM was a big thing 30 years ago. Today, IBM is just one of those companies. So in the technological era, two things are happening. With technological innovation, dramatic rise in prosperity for everybody, because everybody is getting the benefit. Whether mobile telephony, internet, or streaming, UPI now, for instance, all kinds of things. And there is a concentration because there is an aggregator effect. Technology is now aggregating the capacity to deliver services. Now, only if I am on Facebook, only if I am on Twitter or now X, only if I am on something else, will I be able to actually get more efficient services? Because if you are also not there, if I am alone in that, I don't get the benefit. So the aggregator effect is now being felt. Because aggregation is promoted by modern technology, naturally there is going to be greater wealth concentrated in some hands. Now, I don't know what is the answer. Many governments are now grappling with that. Can we eliminate monopoly effect of this without undermining genuine competition and genuine innovation and economic growth? We don't know. They are trying now. Can we stop cross holdings even in these technology companies? So the world is now trying to figure out. We don't know what is the answer. We just don't know what is the answer. But if you create conditions in which they don't want to be with us, but they want to go to some other country, already many companies have moved to Ireland from United States. Why? Ireland among the rich countries has the lowest tax rate. So they pay taxes on the basis of Irish law. So the whole world tried to figure out what happened. They pooled their heads together. They came up with an idea of minimum alternate tax. So in America, for instance, there is a law which says that if you live in America, even if the company is registered in Ireland, you shall pay a minimum of this much tax either in Ireland or in America or some other country. Now, America can afford to say that. Why? People all want to go to America. Can India afford to say that? Can you say that the richest people in the world would want to live in India and stay here? And if you say, if you are here, you must pay this tax or else, what is or else? They'll run away. So, where are we? Right now, we're at a $2,700 per capita income level. We require to grow very fast. We are 1/5 of China in terms of gross GDP. And unless we actually create conditions for more investment, more innovation, more prosperity, more job creation, we'll be in a dangerous place. But does it mean that we leave to the poor to their devices? No. Quality education. Our greatest failure in India is quality education. In the modern world, you acquire the capacity to earn, to invest, to innovate because of technology and skill. Without skill and technology, you can't really take advantage of modern society. Even our engineering education is substandard. Even our university graduation is substandard. That is the real focus that should be. And who is in charge of this education? Government. They are spending lakhs of crores. What are they doing with my tax money? Nothing is happening. Except buildings and buildings. Where is the quality of education? Where is quality of healthcare? Where is infrastructure? We still have, among the large economies, one of the worst infrastructure systems in the world. It is improving in some respects, but we are nowhere near what it should be in a modern economy. So there are two dangers here. You discourage the private individuals and enterprises from doing what is necessary for the country. You take away the incentive. And two, the money government is taking is wasted. You are spending lakhs of crores of rupees. You are not improving education outcomes. You have the worst education outcomes among all large economies in the world. Our healthcare is one of the worst in the world. Our infrastructure is very bad even today. Corruption is ubiquitous. So what is the signal you are saying? The old Soviet model. I take, I plunder, I harass, I humiliate. So why will people stay here? Or why will people work hard? Why will people innovate? So there is need to remove inequality or minimize inequality. That route is through increasing the opportunity for every single child, irrespective of circumstances of birth, building infrastructure, and creating incentive for wealth creation, and spreading prosperity by creating many more growth engines, not merely a few cities. It is a fact that if you are born in Delhi or Mumbai, you have natural advantage. Now, does it mean that we will now say every Delhiite and Mumbaiite will pay higher taxes? It's absurd. It's absurd. You see, it will be wrong on my part to claim that there is no inequality by birth anywhere in the world. I was born in a village. I grew up in a village. I went to a Telugu medium school. Now, certainly my compatriots of my generation who went to some fancy schools in Delhi or Mumbai, they certainly had a lot of opportunity. They had a lot of advantage. Now, there are two ways of responding. I become envious, I become jealous and angry and say they should not go to those schools. Now, is that going to help me? The second is, give people like me and you an opportunity, no matter where you are born, to get good quality education. So that after some years of education, you can compete with anybody anywhere in the country or the world. In my generation, many of us got that opportunity. Though the money spent was very little, still a society cared to give decent education to us. We could compete with anybody. Is that the way to prosperity and dignity of human beings? Or saying that fellow should not go to, let's say, St. Columbus School in Delhi or Doon School somewhere else. Can you stop that? Is that what you're proposing? No matter what taxes you bring, the rich person will give them a better home, will give, quote unquote, a better school, will give better guidance. That's inherent in society. The challenge of the state is, can the poor person get a decent opportunity? You may not get centrally air-conditioned international school. Can we give decent schooling so that your potential is fulfilled? You fail there spectacularly in your duty where you are spending a lot of tax money. And you say, I take more tax money, I promote envy, and I stop growth. What kind of a logic is this? So if we allow our emotion, anger, envy to take over, we guarantee destruction. We must become thoughtful, balanced, rational. No poor person who had opportunities to rise ever thought in terms of taking away something from somebody else, because they have too much of pride and dignity. I can compete with anybody, give me a chance. All they're saying is, give us a chance, give us an opportunity. If the poor are subjected to haftas and corruption every day, humiliation, harassment every day, a vegetable vendor, a rickshaw puller, or some other unorganized worker, for eking out a precarious livelihood, instead of improving skills, organizing them better, giving them a better opportunity, you want to make them victims of corruption, giving them substandard infrastructure, giving them substandard education, substandard healthcare. These are the wrong things. These are the things that are perpetuating poverty and inequality. Not somebody innovating and making more money. Because after all, what will you do with the money? Will you take that money to his grave? That money goes back into the economy. It's invested again. So our duty is to create conditions in which it's worthwhile for the people with means to invest more, to innovate more, not to take away that incentive, make them innovate and invest more. So no matter in whose name the money is shown, ultimately all of us are prospering because incomes grow, jobs are created, economy grows.
Yes, sir. Now, as you said, it should not depend, the opportunities you get should not depend with the place you are born.
And the circumstance, place or the womb,
Yeah.
the circumstance. But that is the central challenge of India. That's a challenge in any society. But we have the worst challenge because we are terrible. We are terrible in imparting education to our children.
Now, a person who comes from a very good, well-off family, he or she they definitely have a privilege over the person who comes from a rural area. Now, this privilege also includes the misuse of power and money they have. Now, if the inheritance tax or something like this, not only inheritance tax, any tax or policy that comes to redistribute the wealth amongst the poor or helps the government to produce good opportunities and resources for the poor kids, don't you think that will be a benefit for the rural kids as well? Not only rural, any people.
First you must understand, government is a terrible manager. Whether it's money or something else, government as a general rule is a terrible manager. They do it inefficiently, they do it corruptly, they do it lavishly. They spend too much to get too little. So, that country is well governed. The government does least amount of functions, but very efficiently in an accountable manner. So don't think the government is a solution. It's necessary, but it is so bad in general, anywhere in the world. You take, for instance, let's say a social welfare hostel. Typically, let's say in a state like Telangana or something, let's say there are 100 children. Let us assume there is no corruption, which is a big assumption. Typically, when there are only 100 children, they will show 200 children. Let's assume there are actually 100 children, they are showing 100 children. Per month, the government spends probably, I don't know how much now, but 750 rupees or 1000 rupees per child for food and other things. So 100 children, per month they are spending 1 lakh rupees, let us say. You know how much government is spending in order to spend that 1 lakh rupees? In addition to the 1 lakh rupees, you have a warden, you have a deputy warden, you have a cook, you have a cleaner or somebody. The 3 or 4 people, their total salary burden alone is of the order of about 2 lakh rupees a month. I am assuming zero corruption. I am assuming zero leakage. So to transfer 1 lakh rupees to the children in that form, the taxpayer is actually spending another 2 lakh rupees. This is government, anywhere in the world. Assuming there is no corruption, but in reality we all know how much corruption there is. You go to any social welfare hostel in the country, you go to most of the government schools in the country, you go to many government hospitals in the country, don't you know what is happening? So first of all, it's a fallacy. The notion that if government takes the money, it's actually promoting social justice is a great fallacy. It is making the fellows in government powerful and rich, and corruption unbridled. The second thing is, the answer to the problem of inequality by birth is utilizing the nature's endowment. Supposing, like in many countries in the world, we are not the only country. Singapore is there, Israel is there. I am talking of countries that became prosperous after Second World War, which were very poor. In 1950 or 60, these are all countries which are at our level. Israel, Singapore, South Korea, Taiwan, none of them was rich in 1950. Today they are in the developed countries. That is $25,000, $30,000, $40,000 per capita income and high quality of life. Now what happened in those countries? They guaranteed, along with many other rich countries, they guaranteed good quality education for every child. I was astounded when I went to China. Up to 8th class free education, free is not the issue. Quality education. You talk to any ordinary Chinese, a taxi driver or or somebody who is helping the tourists or somebody with a relative low level employment. For any question, they give very precise answers and very accurate answers. You can see the quality of education. After 8th class, you have to pay some amount. Not very large amount, but it's not a very small amount either. In those days, it used to be about 1,000 renminbi, 1,000 yuan or something. But quality is very, very good. So quality, particularly at school education level, real quality and skills, simultaneously with investment, promotion, with infrastructure, encourage economic growth, then automatically jobs are created. People with skills and brains and hard work, they are valued because they add enormous value to the economy. Then they prosper. And within a few years' time, for instance, now many kids like me who came from rural areas, after 10, 15 years of schooling or college, none of us felt inferior to anybody from fancy colleges and schools because your natural talent and your hard work, if they are both there, then no amount of privilege will be enough for you to take them out of competition. You can compete and you can succeed. But without that education, those foundations, you can never succeed. Just because somebody transfers 1 lakh rupees to my account, if you think that I can compete with others and then create wealth and become equal to them, you're talking rubbish. Nothing of the kind. The only way I can compete and create wealth and become equal to them, emotionally, intellectually, psychologically and economically, is if my talent is allowed to flower. That means productivity, that means quality education and quality healthcare. And we have failed spectacularly in both. So what are we talking really? What are we trying to say? We created a corrupt administrative and political system where a large part of the resources of the people are swindled by those in power without commensurate benefits to us. And in that situation, instead of improving the efficiency of government, the quality of educational outcomes, an opportunity for every single child, talking about appropriating more money to those in power and government is sinful. It is totally illogical. It is going against historical evidence in the country or abroad, and it is sinful.
Now, sir, you mentioned countries like South Korea, Taiwan, and now Japan. These countries have inheritance tax right now, going on with somewhere around 50%, 25%, some countries 55%. Now, when we are taking such countries as examples, then why can't we, try implementing it here in India?
You're right. See, because this is a selective idea. Many rich countries also have this selective idea. But let me give you countries with zero inheritance tax. Sweden, Slovenia, Singapore, New Zealand, Israel, Hong Kong, Hungary, Estonia, China, and then Austria, Canada, Australia, all 0% tax. Yes, some countries do have inheritance tax. How much are they able to collect? They have efficient tax collection. There is very little corruption. There is very little black money in these countries, and yet those countries that impose, some countries impose very high tax. The collection is only 0.5% or less of GDP. So what are you doing? In Indian conditions, you're creating a huge source of harassment, corruption, arbitrary tax power. Already there is a perception that tax authorities are very arbitrary in this country. There's a lot of arbitrage, there's a lot of corruption, there's a lot of fear. And you're collecting very little, and probably the money spent for tax collection is greater than the amount collected. And you take away the incentive. And in any case, many of these countries are very attractive for people. Even then, many countries are saying that people are willing to relocate elsewhere. They are going to low tax countries. Can India retain very high quality, high net worth individuals with high taxation, given our levels of efficiency in service delivery, our levels of corruption, and our levels of failure of rule of law? So what do we take? Okay. So when you want to imitate the countries that have done wisely and well, and imitate the countries that actually prospered very quickly and learn lessons of our own country's past and other countries' past. We have tried all these. We failed spectacularly. And India was at the bottom of the rung. We started with 2% of the global GDP in 1947. We ended up with 1% of global GDP in 1991. We are just now inching our way backwards to 2%. We are now probably at 3.5% global GDP. This is post 1991. So do you want pre-1991 policies where India from 2%, that is low by our population. We came down to 1%, that was spectacular success with all these tax policies. Post 1991, when we had more rational policies, from 1% we grew to 3.5%. We are now trying to grow even more. So do you want this method of growth, or you want a continuous decline because you have some philosophical idea which you think is very powerful, which actually is not borne out by historical evidence? So common sense, our own conditions, our past experience, global experience, everything tells us it will be disastrous to focus on redistribution in India. It is vital to focus on growth and equity. That is equitable opportunity. By the state doing its job very efficiently, but limiting this role of the state. Any other method is going to end up in an absolute disaster. Just now we are recovering from the past follies. After 50 years or so, 40 years plus of misgovernance, failed policies, disastrous taxation, a license permit quota raj, undermining economic growth, promoting poverty, undermining prosperity, with one of the poorest infrastructures. And even today we suffer from one of the worst education and healthcare systems, and very poor infrastructure, and very poor rule of law. Instead of focusing on doing the government's job better to give everybody an opportunity, we want to further guarantee perpetual failure and increase in poverty. It's a very dangerous trap for the country. Please do not cut the nose to spite the face.
Thank you, sir.